I'm with Bob Przybylski, the producer and director of the Vietnam Voices documentary on QTV. Well done, Bob.
Thanks.
Outstanding documentary. Before we get into the Vietnam Voices documentary, talk a little bit about documentaries at QTV and why we started to do those.
Well, in 2005, at the station, we decided that we would like to do some local programming with a local kind of vibe to it. And we did a documentary. The first one was on World War II. So we found a bunch of World War II veterans and different people who served in the war and kind of told their stories from a local perspective. And that moved into other documentaries about the sawmills and the logging history. And we just ran a gamut of different ones we've done. And then we moved into Korean War. And the natural progression was to move into Vietnam War, with 3, 4, 5 years in between each of these war documentaries. And so we decided the next one was going to be Vietnam. And so that's kind of how that one came about. And I also really wanted to do Vietnam, too.
Right. And QTV ran the docu-series by Ken Burns about Vietnam,
right,
which then morphed into your documentary about Vietnam Voices. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about how long that took and where you found the folks to interview.
Right. Ken Burns' program was 17 hours, and that was kind of a really cumulative history of Vietnam War. And what we wanted to do with ours is to tell the history of the war, but in a more intimate, personal basis with local people who were experiencing it. Many of them you see out in the community, and you don't realize that, man, they got some interesting stories to tell. But I also didn't want it just to be a military documentary, because the Vietnam War, unlike all the other wars I think we've had, affected everybody in the United States because you either were for it or you were against it. And there were so many different avenues that people went down when it was either supporting it, not supporting it, protesting it, all different kinds of things. And I knew there was a lot of options and different things to talk about, so that's kind of what I wanted to do with this project.
And talking to these guys had to be just kind of overwhelming. It was their chance to really just kind of open up about a very difficult experience, right?
Yeah, it was. It was really interesting. And the one thing I like to say is when we did World War II in Korea, we invited everybody to bring in their families, their wives, their grandkids, if they wanted to hear the stories. And most of the guys did. Most of the guys from World War II in Korea brought their wives, some brought their grandkids to hear what they had to say. When we did the Vietnam one, only one guy brought his wife. Everybody else came by themselves. And I don't really know what that means, but I just think that maybe they weren't quite ready to talk about it. They didn't think they were, but when they got in, I mean, you can see what they've said.
Sure, yeah.
So I think it was very healing for a lot of them, and even for the people who didn't serve, but who lost loved ones in there, to tell their story about, and that was my brother who died.
Yeah. Right.
And so I thought that was really interesting.
And tell us about the award you won for this documentary. I know you don't like to toot your horn, but it's important.
Yeah, well, this was the first time that QTV won an Emmy Award for a documentary, and it was for a producer-director for the documentary of the Vietnam Voices, and we're really proud of it, and it's a big deal for a station like us. It's a big deal for any kind of station, but it's a big major award, and we also won the Michigan Association of Broadcasters Documentary of the Year, Historical Documentary of the Year. So we had a good year with Vietnam Voices.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
It's a powerful documentary.
Thank you.
Yeah.